guys, so today I thought I'd sit down and film my wrap up for the first quarter of this year. Let's pull up my phone and see how much I've read so far this year. I've read 33 books so far this year, which is pretty cool. How many months has it been? It's been about 4, right? It's been about 4, so a little bit more than a quarter. A lot of the books that I have read of that 33, or a decent chunk of them, have been for the Woman's Prize long list, which I did just upload a video talking about all those books. So I'm not going to mention those books here. Let's discuss the first book that I read this year. We're off to a great start. It's behind you guys. The first book that I read this year was Galapagos by Kurt Vonnegut. I love Kurt Vonnegut. I consider him like a top favorite writer for sure. I have read, I think this is like my 8th or 9th book of his that I've read. I gave this one 4 stars. I've given like all of his books at least 4 or 5 stars. That's a lie. One of them I gave 3. Which, Timequake, I gave 3. Anyways, that's not important. Galapagos. So I gave this 4 stars. We're following a group of people who are headed on the nature cruise of the century in the Galapagos Islands. A bunch of stuff happens in the world. All these people end up getting trapped on this nature cruise of the century. They lose technology. There's a financial crisis going on in the world, but they don't really know about that. They're just kind of create this own like microcosm of a world on this boat. And they end up stranded on this island. There's like a plague, a disease going on around the world that doesn't affect them, again, because they're completely separated from everyone. And everybody in the world dies. They don't know that. But this group of people ends up repopulating the earth. It's all about evolution. It's super funny in traditional Kurt Vonnegut writing. Smart, funny. I really liked it. I really like Kurt Vonnegut. Love him so much. After that, I read Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, which I listened to on audiobook. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I really liked it. Basically, we're following our 2 main characters. We have a male and a female. It's set in, is it a small town in Minnesota? That's what I'm gonna say. It's in a small town. I think it's in Minnesota, yeah, because they're in Minneapolis. And our female character is a doctor. Her family's super important, super wealthy. Basically, they're really important in this hospital, this huge hospital. She ends up having to drive through this small town, and she meets a guy who helps when she has car trouble. He's a little bit younger than her, but he's really handsome, and he's a really nice guy, and they basically hit it off, and it's their love story. Super cute. So it's like a small town love story, also kind of like a doctor situation involved. I really liked Part of Your World. I really like Abby Jimenez. I really like her books. I loved the main male love interest because he's just like super sweet, and I love nice male love interests. I also do love the bad boy type thing, but I really do prefer like the golden retriever guy type situation, which is what our main character was. I really liked the audiobook. I thought it was really great. So yeah, that's Part of Your World. After that, I listened to Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. I can't say I love Tessa Bailey. I listened to this because my sister told me to listen to it because she read it. It was fine. We follow our main character so it's dual perspective, so we have the male and the female's perspective. Our main character is working for like a Hollywood film crew. She wants to do the soundtracks for movies, and she has a crush on her boss, who's like the director of this film. And our main male narrator is this king crab fisherman in a small town in Oregon or in Washington on the Pacific Northwest. I don't remember specifically. And he is like the bad boy of the town, known for basically sleeping with a lot of women. This is the 2nd book in a interconnected romance series. I did not read the first one, which was It Happened One Summer. I did not read that one. My sister did. She really liked it. But I read Hook, Line, and Sinker. That's what we're talking about. It was just fine. It was just fine. Basically, we start with our two main characters texting each other. So they have this like long distance friendship, basically. She cracks his emotional shell, and their friendship is like super important, and then they fall in love. It was fine. I gave it 2 stars, I think. So that was Hook, Line, and Sinker. After that, I read Crime and Punishment, which I do have here. So after that, I read Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I'm really, really, really glad I finally finished this book. I started it in 2023, like in spring. So I started it a year ago. I finished this in January this year because I put it down for a while. I'm so glad I finally finished it in January. I took so many notes on this while reading it. I have this reading journal, which I got to kind of help me organize my thoughts on some of the books that I was reading, so I didn't forget about them. And so I wrote a bunch of stuff about Crime and Punishment in here. So let's go through it. I would recommend this book to people who are interested in classics, morality, social justice, and philosophy. There's like little sections. It was 486 pages. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on the excitement scale. I gave it a 3 out of 5 on the ease of reading scale. And my overall rating, 4.5. I think on Goodreads I have it down as a 5. I don't remember. What did I think of the book? So the book started a little bit slow for me, like I just said. I'm sure you guys know the premise of this. Basically, we follow Raskolnikov. He's down on his luck financially, and he murders this woman, and it's basically the whole book is him trying to get away with it, and it's how the guilt kind of cripples him and what have you. Of course, there's much more to it than that, but that's like the main gist of it. The book felt super grimy. There was lots of grimy feelings. It made me think about laws, rules, chaos, and what's right and wrong. There were very Christian tones to this book. Especially at the end. It wrapped up with a sickly sweet teachings about how guilt will always come for everyone, when in reality, that is not at all true. Okay. This was the first book I'd read in a while that really engaged me intellectually, which is why I liked it so much. Exactly what I just said. I hadn't read a book in a long time that I felt like really made me think, and again, challenged me intellectually. This totally did it, and it made me feel really excited about reading again. So that's why I really loved Crime and Punishment and gave it such a high rating, because it's just a book that makes you think. It's a book that makes you think. There's so many like philosophical digressions and conversations about morality in this book, and so many different ways that you can, there's definitely an overall message in this book, but there are so many different ways that I think that you can interpret morality and right and wrong in this book. I think that it would be interesting to see people's opinions on it, like where people's opinions lie. Though again, like I said, it's definitely a book that has a message at the end, which, like I said, I don't totally agree with it. What was the most interesting? I'm literally going through what I wrote in here. What was the most interesting, intriguing, challenging, or surprising? I wrote on page 242, 243, Raskolnikov was comparing himself and men to Napoleon. He argues that some special men are above the law and structure of society, how some men's bad actions are justified because doing them will kill one evil to make life actually better. But he also sees the contradiction and psychological cost. Okay. What are you going to take away from this book? Page 235, sticky note. Okay, let's find it. Page 235, sticky note. Okay, so on page 235, I underlined a bunch of things, and I'm going to try to paraphrase why I underlined it. I guess this was a part of the book where Raskolnikov was talking about how each man, each human has their own universe going on inside their heads, has all these feelings that makes them, because we can all feel so intensely and have these individual thoughts and this free will. I think that we all feel that we are unique, which we are, but like above the actual, you know, like above a different level. We're like extra special. We're extra special. We have this special extra layer to us because we have all these feelings and thoughts and what have you, but we're not special because we all have the ability to think and feel, you know? So he's talking about how men justify their actions to themselves because they think they are above it because of these intense feelings and feelings and thoughts that we have. So yeah, the idea that everyone and every man thinks themselves extraordinary and justifies all the actions to themselves because we are all animals with intense feelings and experiences. Therefore, must we be extraordinary? What else did I write? There was a lot. I don't need to sit here forever and talk about it. Just read Crime and Punishment. I think it's definitely worth the read, and I understand why it's a book that's listed as like top books you should read before you die. I could totally see. I wrote here, the bad men's actions in this book are contrasted with the few other characters in this book who make socially unacceptable decisions in order to help their families and better their lives. This is asking us to find the line between what is actually good and actually bad. Examples of these people include Raskolnikov's sister and his lovers. Yeah, they're the female characters in here I just felt like unrealistic to me. There's like this one woman who was a widow and she had all these kids, and she just was pretty comical, if I'm being honest, with the way that she was dealing with this situation that she ended up in. Also, Raskolnikov's lover, she was like a prostitute, but she was like this angelic type character. She was like a super angelic type character, and I just feel like unrealistic with the situations that she had gone through. Like, if you put a real human in the life of that character, they would not come out the way that the character actually did come out at the end. I don't think, but that's just my opinion. Yeah, and there are lots of great quotes in this book, and that's all I'll say about that, because I guess I wrote a lot down. But yeah, read Crime and Punishment. I'm really glad I read it. So that's that. And then, I read Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. I read this because of the World Tour Book Club, which Emmy Reads does, which I kind of fell off of, but I'm planning on getting back on the wagon for that. This I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. This read like a telenovela, and I'm really glad I read it though, because this is like a Mexican classic. Now I know about it, now I know what's up. We're following this family in Mexico, and it's a little bit magical realism. Our main character is the cook for her family. There's my favorite part of this book was the beautiful descriptions of cooking and food, and the magical realism elements are that the food kind of has magical powers, and when people eat it, things happen to them and what have you. But I just like couldn't with these characters. They were so dramatized. It was a telenovela, and I just didn't know that going into it. I guess it did definitely have its level of charm for sure. So I do think that while I rated this so low, it's definitely something that's worth the read. I just hated the guy. I hated Pedro. I think his name was Pedro. Hated him. I didn't like the main characters. The whole thing about the romantic relationship really bothered me. Really, really, really bothered me. So that's Like Water for Chocolate. Really glad I did read it though. And then after that, because I was in the mood to read more about food, because I loved that, I read Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto, which is translated from the Japanese. This is basically 2 short stories that are connected by theme. So they're both about grief and dealing with grief with food. Kind of, like loosely about food. And this was just a quiet, beautifully written book about grief. And that's really all there is to say about it. There are some beautiful quotes in this. The translation was a little bit choppy at certain points, but I'd recommend it if that sounds at all interesting to you. After that, I read Something to Do with Paying Attention by David Foster Wallace. And I've always wanted to read a David Foster Wallace because his name precedes him. And he wrote, Infinite Jest. I don't have an interest in reading Infinite Jest at all after reading this book. And I certainly didn't want to start there. It was super intimidating, which is why I saw this at the bookstore, super slim. And I thought, that's great. I'll see what his writing style is like. I'll see what it's about. And great. This is actually, from what I understand, a full story, completed story that was supposed to be a story inside of another book that he wrote when he was alive, but he didn't get to finish before he passed away. And so the larger work was called The Pale King, and it's about the IRS and working for the IRS and life and what have you. And so this, we follow a self-proclaimed wastoid, a boy who is living in the 70s, and he doesn't really know what he wants to do with his life. He's going to college, and he ends up deciding to work for the IRS. It's about his relationship with his father as well, which is really the main crux of this book, is kind of seeing that generation divide, and the mentality that different generations have surrounding work and society and expectations and what have you. And that was what was good about this. I feel like there were really, really beautiful, deeper human moments about this book, but I wish it was the whole thing, because there were a lot of digressions about taxes and the IRS, which honestly just like completely went over my head, in one ear, out the other. So I gave this 3 stars, and I probably won't pick up any more David Foster Wallace, which is unfortunate because the moments that worked for me in this really worked for me. But I just don't think that it would be worth it for me to wade through kind of all the other technical stuff. He's probably not the author for me, you know what I mean? But I'm glad I tried this. I'm really glad I tried that. After that, this is hands down the best book of the year so far. There are a lot. I have a lot of pretty good books that I've read so far this year, but this, I think, is the best book of the year, my favorite. And that is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, which is my second book that I've read by this author. I read Clara and the Sun first, which was a mistake. Don't start there. It's like, I didn't care for Clara and the Sun, which put me off of reading this for such a long time, because this is such a big name, this book. Everyone recommends it all the time. And I thought, well, I hated Clara and the Sun, so like, I don't want to read that. But this year, for some reason, I picked it up, and I'm so glad I did. And I can barely talk about this book. I can't talk about this book because it's going to make me cry. And my eyes are watering right now. I'm so emotional. I feel like I cry every time I sit down to talk about books in every single video. I like almost cry. Sometimes you don't know. Sometimes you guys don't know. But I'm sitting there, I'm choking it back. Oh, here comes a tear. Anyway, I also feel like this is a hard book to talk about because I feel like you can spoil it, even though there's not really anything concrete to spoil. Meaning, this book is such a quiet, slowly creeping novel, whose the point of it is never explicitly explained, but to explain anything specific, if the author were to have explained anything specific, it would have taken away the actual meaning behind this book. I hope that makes sense. But basically we follow a group of kids that are in a private boarding school, and they all grow up together in this private boarding school. It's about their relationships they have with each other and this school. And this is just about life. read this. If there's any part of you that's like nervous to read this, I don't care. Read it. Truthfully, because I never thought I'd pick that up in like a casual Ishiguro book after reading Clara and the Sun. Read it. Read it. Read it. Read it. Read it. You will cry. You will cry, and you won't even fully know why you're crying. The book is just like a big feeling. It's like this overwhelming feeling. Oh my god, it was so good. Ooh, I can't. Moving on, after that I read Passing by Nella Larson, which was such a painfully average book to me, and I feel bad saying that. But it is what it is. I watched the movie after I read this too, and it didn't really do anything. It just didn't do anything for me. If you've heard of The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, that book came out maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, and brought this book back into public attention, because this is a classic, I think, written in or around the 20s, 30s. And it's about these two women who are both black women, but they can pass for white, and it's about how one of them chooses to live her life passing as a white woman, and she marries a white man who is very racist. And it's kind of about her keeping her identity secret. And the other woman lives her life as a black woman, so she marries a black man, and it's about her life. It sounds so interesting, right? But I'd really recommend reading The Vanishing Half, because that book is a retelling of this, paying homage to this, and that was a really good read. But this just felt like it didn't go into depth. I didn't feel like it just didn't go into depth with anything. I don't feel like it was super as psychologically significant as it could have been. There could have been a lot of really great philosophical digressions, and you could have delved more into the character's psychology, because that's really, I think, what it was trying to be about. These two women's relationship with, like, their mentalities on how to live. One is a bit more, like, I guess, daring than the other one, and the other one's a bit more bitter. But it was just fun. I don't think that you need to read this. Like, I would recommend picking up The Vanishing Half. That was a really great book. I remember I gave it 5 stars. After that, I listened to Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score, which is the first book in an interconnected romance trilogy. And I liked it. I think I gave it 3 stars. Let's see what I gave it. Yeah, I gave it 3 stars. It's a long book. It is in a small town, again, somewhere in the United States. I forget where. And we follow our main character, who has a twin sister, but she has a twin sister who has like a 12 or 13-year-old daughter that our main character didn't know about. Her twin sister is like a criminal. She's not a nice or good person. So she ends up getting to this small town, and she's had things happen in her life, so she's a little bit like, her life is kind of crumbling around her before this book starts. So she ends up going to this small town, and everyone thinks she's her twin sister, but she's not, and so people don't like her at first. And then everything's explained. She meets this grumpy man who owns a couple businesses. He owns a bar, he's a barber, I think, or he owns a barbershop. He kind of helps her out, but he's super grumpy, and she ends up having to raise her sister's daughter, and that's cute. So the relationship with her trying to get to know her niece, and kind of becoming her niece's mother, essentially, and the relationship that the niece has with our main male love interest is super cute. That was definitely the best part of the book for me. He was just kind of a jerk. Like, he really was just a jerk of a guy, and I didn't find him to be romantically interesting because of that. I don't like those guys that are like, oh yeah, just like grumpy, but like actually nice guys, but just like grumpy, and they think they're cool for it. You know? So anyways, that's Things We Never Got Over. After that, I read My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh, and I give this 5 stars. Really, honestly, don't let the fact that this is like such a TikTok sensation put you off. I think this is totally worth the hype. I think this is such a good look at depression. Such a good look at depression. I get really bothered that, so this book's reputation is now like the sad girl book. The book that all the girlies, like depressed girlies like. Which, like, yeah, sure. But I also feel like the world is so good at, unfortunately so good at, taking anything that a lot of young women, and by young women I mean like under 40, taking whatever young women like and making it a joke almost, or kind of invalidating it. That's so annoying, but I'm sure you all know what this is about. I'm sure a lot of you have already read this. If you haven't, I'd really recommend reading it. It just captures the experience of depression, I think, perfectly, and I do really love the way that it ended. I myself have experienced really severe depression before. I think that's a pretty unfortunately common thing, especially as this book so aptly magnifies, especially because of the fast-paced world that we live in today, and the look at consumerism, and the way that capitalism and consumerism really runs all of our lives, pretty much. It just can be entirely mentally debilitating. It's not the way that we're meant to live. So she also has some traumatic family history going on, and both of her parents have recently passed away, so she's dealing with grieving that, and she basically has to go through this like rebirth, and so I really loved it at the end. She like wakes up from this year of self-induced like heavy medicated sleep and goes outside and like appreciates nature and touches grass and gets rid of all of her belongings, and I really like this. I really, really like this. If you haven't read it yet, if you have any like preconceived notion about it, I'd still recommend reading it. I think that it's really worth it. After that, I listened to The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. This is totally overhyped. I didn't get this one. Sure, it's cute, but I thought it was like too cheesy and corny, and it was like really melodramatic. I didn't care for this one. I think I gave it 2 stars. We're following, there's basically like a magical apartment that takes our main character, who is a publisher in New York City, or she works in publishing in New York City, takes her back into the past where she meets this man who is staying in this, her grandmother who had just passed away, so it's about grief as well. But this man is renting the apartment 7 years in the past, while in that timeline she's like on a trip somewhere with her grandmother who was alive, or her aunt, who at the time is still alive. Anyway, she meets this guy who's a chef, and he has all these aspirations to become the chef, and then in present day, our main female narrator's present day, he is this like famous chef, and her job is to like publish his new cookbook coming out, and so there's like tension there. I don't know. I didn't think they had a lot of chemistry. I think this book is overhyped. Then I listened to Bride by Ali Hazelwood, which I also did not care for. I think I also gave it like 2 stars. I haven't read anything else by Ali Hazelwood, so this was my first by her. I have The Love Hypothesis on my shelves in front of me, which I will read for sure, but Bride was her romantasy debut, which is kind of like an urban fantasy. Our main character is a vampire, and the love interest is a werewolf. And there are like human, werewolf, and vampire factions, and there's politics going on about like how they're communicating with each other and who has more control and more power and what have you. Werewolves and vampires do not get along in this world. Our main character was raised kind of with the humans for political reasons, so she doesn't really identify as a vampire, although she is a vampire. Or she relates a lot to the humans, and she goes to live, again, for political reasons. She's married off to this this werewolf leader, the alpha, and she is his mate, and he's like, oh my gosh, like, why is she my mate? Like, she's not even a werewolf. Politics, romance, interesting sexual technicalities going on in the book. it was fine. I didn't think that it was very good. It was pretty weak, and I didn't feel like they had much romantic chemistry either. After that, I read House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas, which was the third book in the Crescent City series. Took me a lot longer to read than I thought that it would. I took it on vacation with me, by the way. So unfortunately disappointed with House of Flame and Shadow. It honestly it wasn't everything that I wanted it to be. I still gave it 4 stars. I love Sarah J. Maas. So I was slightly I was just disappointed. I wanted it to like consume me, take over my life, be everything that I wanted it to be. I don't even know. I can't talk about it because it's like so deep in a series, but I don't even know exactly what I wanted from it. I just left feeling super unsatisfied. It kind of read like a first draft. And I do feel like because she is so big, Sarah J. Maas is so big, and she like she could sell anything. Like anything she wrote, we would flock and buy it for sure. And I still would, you know. I feel like she's probably not as edited as she could be, and that's just how it reads to me, unfortunately. But I still love Sarah J. Maas. Excited to continue. That just left me disappointed. It wasn't everything that I wanted. I listened to Delila Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake, which is a female-female romance set in a small town about Delila Green, who is a photographer, and I forgot the other main, Claire, who owns like a little independent bookshop, which is super cute, and she has a daughter. So it's their relationship. They knew each other when they were young. Delila is stepsisters with Claire's best friend, who is supposed to be getting married in this book, and Delila comes back to this small town. She has a fraught relationship with her sister. She comes back to this small town to photograph her sister's wedding. Anyway, Claire and Delila have this romantic relationship. I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked Delila's character. Really liked it. Claire was kind of annoying, probably because I listened to it on audio though, and audio really affects your reading experience because of the voice of the person narrating it. I'm like, wow, their voice sounds annoying. So Claire's voice sounded super annoying, so I had a hard time with that one. It's probably why I couldn't rate it any higher, but I really liked Delila. So yeah, love Delila Green Doesn't Care. I love Ashley Herring Blake's YA and middle grade books, and this was my first adult book that I've read by her. I listened to The Standin by Lily Chu, which was like an Audible original audiobook. I don't know if they sell it physically, which is following, let's see if I can remember, it's slightly forgettable, but it was fine. It was cute. It's like a 2.5, 3-star listen. It's about our main character. I think it's set in Canada, who is Chinese-Canadian. Yeah, Gracie Reed. She's trying to figure out her life and what makes her happy and what have you. She has like a creepy boss who's creepy to her, and she gets fired from her job. She needs money because her mother has dementia and she needs to help pay for her care. So she's struggling financially, and these really famous actors are in town who are like super famous in China, and are kind of moving over to the Western world, trying to build their name up here, but they're still pretty huge in Canada as well. And there's a male and a female. The romantic relationship is with the male actor, but the female, I forget her name, reaches out to Gracie, our main character, because they look identical, and she keeps getting, like, on the streets, paparazzi confuse her with this famous actress, Fong Li, I think is her name, if I remember correctly. And so Fong Li comes to Gracie and is like, can you please pretend to be me? I'll pay you a bunch of money. I'm like struggling right now. I can't go to all these events. And so she's like, sure. She ends up taking the job because she needs the money and what have you. It's about Fong Lee's is like struggling with depression, so it's about mental health. And Gracie has to like learn how to be this different celebrity person, so there's like that element to it. And her relationship with the main character turns into a romantic relationship. I liked the guy. It was cute. It was overall nothing special, but it was cute, and I loved the mental health representation. After that, I read The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, which I won't say anything about here because I do have a full reading blog dedicated to this, so I'll link that down below. I ended up giving this 3 stars. I wanted to like it more than I did, is the gist. It's just too long. No book needs to be that long. Anyway, then I listened to The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, which was really cute. I really liked this. We follow our main character who is, it's set in England, and she is a witch, but witches kind of like have to keep it on the down low. I think is it like accepted in this world that witches are real? Anyways, there's a lot of witches in this world. There's magic. She's keeping it on the down low. She's, witches in this world can't be together for too long, otherwise like bad things happen, like there's too much magical energy, or so that's what the older witches have always told her. She had a pretty sad upbringing. Her mother passed away when she was born, because all witches, there's like a curse on the witches where like right after they give birth they die. So she's very lonely. Someone reaches out to her because she has this like, she's like pretending to be a witch on Instagram or on TikTok, but she's actually a real witch, and someone reaches out to her and is like, oh my god, I can tell she's a real witch, like please come, and we have all these kids, we have these 3 little witch kids living in this big house that we need to teach magic to, but like none of us are witches, so like help. So she takes the job and goes and like lives in this big house with all these beautiful, cute, fantastic people, and helps raise these little witches and teaches them magic. Super cute. She ends up falling in love with the father figure to these 3 little adopted witches, and he is also the librarian in this big house. Super, super, super cute. I pre-ordered her next book, which is coming out on December 24th of 2024, which will be called, I don't know, what is it going to be called? A Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. So yeah, that comes out at the end of this year. Loved The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. Super cute, charming, wholesome, heartwarming. And then we go into all the Women's Prize books that I read. But among that, like during the time I was reading all of those, I also listened to Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, which was so good. Like, so good. I can't even believe how good this was. Again, the mental health representation was representing. Oh my gosh, it was so good. And I loved the male love interest. I really liked our main female character. It's a dual POV. Yeah, Abby Jimenez just really hits it out of the water. She really hits it out of the water. Both of our main characters are doctors working at the same hospital. It's the second book in the Part of Your World series, so I mentioned the first one earlier. But they're both doctors at the same hospital. Our main female love interest is going through a divorce because her ex-husband or her husband cheated on her with her best friend. So there's some trauma there for sure. And then our main male love interest is like his ex-girlfriend of 3 years left him to get engaged to his brother. Again, trauma there. And his family is worried about him, and he has really bad anxiety. He has really bad social anxiety, which was just such a great part of this book. I loved it. It was so relatable. And his family's worried about him, and he's like, no, don't be worried about me. So he like fake dates our female character, but they fall in love. Oh my gosh. 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 This book was so good. Oh, so good. Again, then we had more Women's Prize reading. And the last book that I just recently read was One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I also listened to this. I gave it 2.5 stars. I give it 2.5 stars. This is the first book in a fantasy romance duology. I am currently reading the second book, by the way, but first book in a fantasy romance duology, and we're following our main character, Elspeth Spindle, who in this world called Blunder, we have all these families who live in these big castles, pretty much, who are named after trees. So their gods are like the trees in this world. There is magic in this world that has to do with these playing cards. So there's 12 Providence cards, which if you have them, it's kind of a big deal. You can tap them 3 times and you can possess this magic that it possesses, but it comes at a cost, so it does damage to you. There's this mist in this land of Blunder that causes an infection in these people who like get taken over by this mist, and whoever gets infected, the king of this world puts to death, because these people, like, if you're infected, you get this magic, and that's like pretty threatening to the king. So our main character was infected as a child, but kept it secret. Her family kept it secret, and the magic that she got from her infection ended up being that she like absorbed the soul of this nightmare card, which is one of the magical cards, into her head. So she basically has this monster, this nightmare monster voice living in her head. So she has this other person living in her body, basically. Yeah. The love interest's name is Raven Yu, and he is the captain of the King's Guard. So that's cool. I felt like the romance was pretty weak in the book, if I'm being honest. I feel like the atmosphere of the world is what makes it unique and good. It's like a cozy, creepy kind of a read. And it reminds me of Rumpelstiltskin and Moss. That's what it reminds me of. Those are the vibes. Dark, crumbling, mossy castles, which is cool. Yeah, the first book, again, was fine. This book has taken over TikTok. Like, people have been loving this book. I could totally see why. It's a very unique, atmospheric read. Again, I could tell while listening to it that it was a book I'd probably prefer reading physically, which is why I picked up the second book physically. So Two Twisted Crowns, which I'm really liking better so far. But yeah, that's One Dark Window. So those are all of the books that I've read so far this year. It's been a pretty great reading year so far. I cannot complain. What have you read so far this year? Please share. What has been your favorite read that you have read so far this year? What have you been really disappointed by? And is there anything that you're really hoping to get to? I want to say before the end of the year, but we have like a lot of the year left. So what are we doing? Panicking and rushing? I don't know. We're almost halfway through. That's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and goodbye.